Well, it's 8:30 and we have a quorum, so I guess I'll get started. A few preliminary words before I call the meeting to order. Thank you to everyone joining us for the city, what we have to believe is the city's first teleconference city council meeting being conducted under state statute authorizing us in this extraordinary time to do so. We have a few announcements to make regarding this teleconference meeting. If the teleconference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the audio connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to March 31st, later today at 1 o'clock via teleconference. We have no reason to think that that will happen, but we just wanted to plan ahead for that potential scenario. The agenda and documents are located on okc.gov. And as an aside, I'll say to find the page, I often just Google okc.gov's agendas or meetings, and you can find it that way for sure. And you can follow along with what we're doing today. Anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item, public hearing, or to speak under citizens to be heard, I'm going to give you a couple options here, and you might want to grab a pencil if you think that this is something you're going to want to do. The phone number to call is 405-297-2391. So that's 405-297-2391. That's to go ahead and sign up in advance to speak. You could also text. That number for texting that you would like to speak on a particular item or under citizens to be heard is 405-219-7927. So that texting number is 405-219-7927. Either way, please provide your name, phone number, the item number, and the reason you wish to comment. If you call in after your item has been heard, you can still potentially speak under citizens to be heard because that's near the end of the meeting. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to comment. I ask that all participants except the council members keep their phones on mute until they are recognized to speak. Council, of course, is invited to jump in, ask questions, or comment at any time during the meeting. I've got my phone, council members have my cell phone. If they would like to text, they're welcome to, but they can also just speak up. Call meeting to order. Oh, I'm just like reading off a teleprompter. Sorry, now I will now call the meeting to order.
Mayor,
and,
can you hear me? Yeah. This is James Cooper.
Yes, welcome, Councilman Cooper.
Yeah, sorry, we had technical difficulties on our end.
Very good. All right. Well, with the formalities out of the way, I will now call the meeting to order. And Francis, did you want to do a roll call?
Yes. This is Francis Kersey, and I'm going to do the official roll call for the call to order. Mayor Holt?
Yes, present.
Councilman Griner?
Present.
Councilman Cooper?
Present.
Councilman McAtee?
Present.
Councilman Stone?
I'm here.
Councilman Greenwald?
Here.
Councilman Greenwald, thank you. Councilwoman Hammond?
Here.
Councilwoman Nice?
Here.
Councilman Stonecipher?
Present, thank you.
All right, thank you. That voice you'll hear probably quite a bit during this meeting is Francis Kersey, the city clerk. We will have to do all votes by roll call, so that'll probably be the most tedious part of this meeting is all the voting, but that's who will be handling that. We'll start with item 2, Office of the Mayor. We have items A through H here. Item A is notification that Councilman Todd Stone will become Vice Mayor on April 8th. And items B through H are appointments to COTPA, HP, City County Health, that's timely, Oklahoma City Park Commission, Riverfront Redevelopment Authority, Riverfront Design Committee, and the Traffic Commission. And I would also point out that item C was corrected in a timely manner, and it should have said John Milner, not John Myler. We can take items A through H with one motion.
Move the item. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And when I say any further discussion, normally I look around and kind of look at your faces, but now I'll have to ask you to speak up at that moment. And presuming none, I will move forward and ask Francis to call the roll for a vote on a motion for items 2A through H.
Councilman Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone, Greenwald,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 3, Journal of Council Proceedings. We have 2 items here we could take with one motion.
Move the item.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I would ask the clerk to read the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone, Greenwald,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yeah, you didn't call me earlier, did you? Yeah, I'll be like to be recorded as Jeff on the previous vote as well. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Now moving on to item 4, request for uncontested continuances. Listed on the agenda is item 8A1, which will be continued to April 28th. Mr. City Manager, are there any other items?
Yes, there are. Starting on page 18, item 8L1, dilapidated structures. Item D, all of these items will be stricken from the agenda. Item D, 2701 Northeast 21st Street to re-notify the owner. Item E, 1014 Northeast 22nd Street to re-notify the owner. I'm sorry, the owner is removed. On page 19, item 8M1, unsecured structures. Item G, 2132 North Lottie Avenue, the owner has secured. Item H, 2136 North Lottie Avenue, the owner is secured. Item U, 1306 Southwest 27th Street to re-notify for a new owner. Item X, 22 Southeast 31st Street, the owner has secured. Item Y, 717 Southwest 32nd Street, the owner is secured. On page 20, to continue item 8M1, unsecured structures, item AA, 2418 Southwest 44th Street, the owner is secured. All those items are stricken from the agenda. On page 20, item 8N1, abandoned buildings, all of these items will be stricken from the agenda. Item D, 2132 North Lottie Avenue, the owner is secured. Item E, 2136 North Lottie Avenue, the owner is secured. And item K, 2701 Northeast 21st Street, to re-notify the owner. That's all the items I have.
Thank you. We have no revocable permits under item 5, so we'll recess the council meeting and now convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through F we could take with one motion.
Move the item.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone, Greenwald,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. And I would ask everyone who is not a council member to mute your phone, please. You may think I'm not speaking to you, and I don't know who I'm speaking to, but there's definitely some chatter in the background. And please, if you are listening to this call and you are not a council member, please mute your phone. And even if you are a council member, if there's people talking in your space, we can hear it. So please, I will now adjourn OCMFA and convene as Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have 3 items we can take with one motion.
Move the item.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwald,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. We'll now adjourn OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust, where by custom, we typically vote on claims and payroll, even though that's debatable whether we need to, but let's go ahead and do it. Would there be a motion for adoption of the one item under OCEAT?
Move the item.
Move approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwald,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. We'll now adjourn OCEAT, convene as the council meeting, reconvene as the council meeting, where we find ourselves on the consent docket, item 6. I believe I'm aware of only one item that you may have a few words to say about, and that is item F, that will have a very brief presentation. Council members, just try to speak up real quick here if there's something that you wanted to speak to here.
Yes, this is Councilwoman Hammond. I also wanted to pull AS for further discussion and just information from our Chief of Police.
S as in Sam?
Sam.
Okay.
Mayor, this
Yes.
is Councilperson Cooper. When we get to that particular item, even though I'm on a leave of absence this year from OKCPS, I think it's probably wise that I recuse myself from this conversation.
Okay, so we'll do a separate vote then, that does not include you on that item.
Thank you.
So we'd had a request on, for the chief of police to speak to AF1.
So just the F1, right?
F1, right.
Yeah. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to talk about before we go to that? Okay, we'll start there then. F1,
Chief Gorley, are you on?
Corley?
Chief Corley is participating. He's currently muted, though. He would need to unmute himself.
What was that?
Chief Corley, if you'll dial 6 from your phone, it will unmute.
So the phone that Chief Gorley's on needs to be unmuted so that he can speak to this item.
Chief Gorley?
16th Street.
Okay, so why don't we deal with the other item? You can call Chief Corley and see what's going on. The other item was item AS, and Councilwoman Hammond, you wanted to speak to that?
Well, I wanted to ask the chief a few more questions just about how this looks and works with having police in our schools. So,
all right, well, never mind. That also involves the chief. Okay.
You may try star 6, because that's what happened with mine.
Chief, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
Yeah, we got you.
All right, Chief, let's go back to item F1, Chief.
Okay, sorry about that. I was unmuting, but it wouldn't take it, so it finally did after a couple of tries. Wade Gorley, Chief of Police. I want to make sure, are you talking about the Magnus leadership training?
Yes.
Okay. This is part of a continuation of a process that we've been working on for a couple of years in improving leadership throughout the police department. One of the initial steps was we changed our leadership training for new supervisors. We just did our first training school with that and made it a 2-week school with more hands-on type learning and scenario-based learning. Part of that too was last year we did a program through Strata Leadership that took every supervisor up to myself through a leadership process in leadership skills and how to determine our leadership styles, and training was very well received. So this is a continuation in that program, and this is another leadership training that we'll be putting everybody through on the police department. This is a little more in-depth type training, and it deals with crisis management, which under the circumstances I think will be very good for our department, and the training has been something that's been very well received in other areas, and we're pretty excited about this. And again, from the lieutenant all the way up to myself, we'll go through this training process, and then we'll get together afterwards and determine implementation and how we improve our leadership throughout the police department through this training.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief? Hearing none. Chief, can you also speak to item AS? Councilwoman Hammond wanted to maybe ask you a question about that. Councilwoman Hammond, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I was just kind of curious how, I saw some information in the memo just about, that this is a contract that we have with the OKC Public School District. And I'm just curious how many officers this pays for, like what their role in the school is, and kind of how the program looks.
I don't have the exact number on the campus resource officers. I can get you that. But their role in the school is basically security, providing security for the schools that they're in, and making sure, with school violence and things that go on around the country, they're there as a deterrent for that. We have campus resource officers that are assigned to certain schools, and they're just there to work with the administrators, work with the students, and make sure that things are going well in the school and that there's no violence or anything like that occurring.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to know how many and kind of which schools, if it's just one in every public school regardless of first or secondary, or if it's just middle and high school, or kind of how that looks across the district. Yeah, if you could provide us that information at some point, I'd be appreciative.
Yeah, it's secondary and high schools. If you need it, I can get you exactly which schools they're in, and we have all that information if that's something you need.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I think just from my perspective that, I don't know, $2 million is a lot for the school district to be providing security, whereas, I think that money being spent on counselors or other things that encourage, safety of students among one another and them being able to, I think just kind of at my core, having police officers in our schools is just not, the best use of resources. So that's what I just kind of wanted to get a sense more about how kind of it looks and which schools they're in. And so thank you.
Yeah, these are, this is at the request of the school system. This is something that they've come to us and want us to provide. It's not something that we're forcing on them or putting out there for them to do. This is what the school system has come to us and asked us to provide for them to make sure their students are safe.
Yeah. Well, I guess on record, I'd like to encourage them to think about safety in maybe a more expansive way. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I would also like that information, and this is Councilwoman Nice, as it pertains to what schools the officers are in, because I'm curious if there's a difference with urban school districts or the schools in general, and what that looks like when it comes to those resource officers. I mean, in my situation, growing up in public schools, we had officers, so I'm just curious to know, particularly if that's something that the school district asks for, those particular schools, or how we relate and work with those schools for the certain schools that we have officers in.
Okay, I can get that.
So, on that particular item, we need to have a separate vote, so that Councilman Cooper may recuse. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion and go ahead and adopt that item 6AS?
I'd move item 6AF.
Second.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll, absent Councilman Cooper's name.
Griner,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
No.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion carries 7-1. Now we have the rest of the consent docket we could take with one motion.
Move the consent docket.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper, McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.
Okay, Cooper's absent.
Yeah.
This is Cooper. Was that the consent vote?
Yes, without the item you needed to recuse from. Did you wish to vote yes on that item?
Yes.
I mean, on the consent docket?
On the consent docket, please.
Yes, okay, all right. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on now to the concurrence docket, item 7. We have items A through J. We could take with one motion.
Move the item.
Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. All right, we're now at item 8, items requiring separate votes. Item 8A1 was deferred to April 28th. As I present items on this particular part of it, the planning items, I will mention whether someone has already signed up to speak. We have a couple. Item 8A2 is 9507 West Memorial Road from AA to PUD 1742. And Councilman Stone Cipher Kendall Dillon is the applicant, or representing the applicant, and he is on the line and has signed up to speak if necessary. He said he's just here if there are questions. I'll turn it over to you, Councilman Stone Cipher.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an ordinance on final hearing to rezone the property. It is to permit a modified office and residential use. It went before the Planning Commission on February 13th and was approved. There are no protests, so I would move the ordinance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, this is Councilman Hammond. I had a question about why TE3 was deleted and what that pertained to. And my understanding is that there was something that staff was wanting, but it got maybe deleted in the Planning Commission.
So Bob Teener is available to speak to that one if Bob can unmute the phone that he's on.
This is Bob Teener, Development Services Director. The discussion was about residential sprinklers because this plat is outside the rural response time. the planning commission discussed it, and a majority recommended that TE be deleted.
Can you speak to what that rural response time means and why it would make sense to delete that?
Well, the rural response time is 6.5 minutes from a fire station, and at this point, there's not a new station in that area, and the fire chief felt that they needed to consider fire sprinklers for public safety. But in this area, there's multiple developments that are already existing, and the planning commission felt that this wasn't really the appropriate time to add that requirement to this development.
Okay.
So we have a motion and second, Your Honor.
Next week's vote.
Yeah, we do. Is there any other questions on the item?
Right behind him, 80 on Monday.
Okay. I think hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Briner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
No.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion carries 8-1. Moving on to item 8A3. And again, if someone is not on the council, please mute your phone. 8A3, we've got 1620 North Blackwelder Avenue going from SPUD 942 to SPUD 1162. No one has signed up to speak. Councilwoman Hammond?
Yeah, this is an application to essentially permit an Airbnb in home sharing in a development in the Plaza District, and I will motion for approval.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Briner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Item 8.
Mayor,
Yes.
this is James Cooper. I'm not really sure what the protocol is here. Not this one with Councilperson Hammond, but the previous one with Councilperson Stonecipher, AA2. I thought we were on AA1, so I was reading that incorrectly. My planning commissioner was one of the no votes on AA2, and I would actually, if it is possible, I'd like to vote no instead of yes on that. If not, then fine, but I would at least like it noted that my planning commissioner was one
Mayor.
of the no votes.
Yeah, we would have to rescind,
We would have to have a
reconsider.
motion to rescind the vote, right? And then vote on that motion and then motion to pass the item again, is that right?
Correct. A motion to reconsider, and if that passes, then you have a motion on the item again, and then you have a re-vote.
So, Mr. Councilman Cooper, you would need to make a motion to rescind the passage of 8A2 if you wish to do that.
Then I would like to make that motion to rescind.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second to rescind the vote on item 8A2. Clerk, please call the roll.
Briner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
No.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion carries 8-1. Councilman Stonecipher, would you like to make another motion to approve item 8A2?
For the second time, I'd move the item, please.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
No.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
No.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes, please.
Mayor.
Yes, motion carries 7-2. Okay, we did item 8A3, correct? That's handled?
Yes.
Okay, so we're on item 8A4, 3237 Northwest 192nd Street, going from PUD 1686 to SPUD 1194, Councilman Stonecipher. And there's no one who has signed up to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an ordinance on final hearing to rezone the property to permit office development. It was approved February 13th by the Planning Commission. There are no protests. So at this time, I would move the item, please.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. 8B is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval. It closes the south 10 feet of West Park Place right-of-way between Classen and Western. The applicant, Tim Johnson, is available for questions. Councilwoman Hammond.
Yes, this is, some time ago, a few months ago, we approved this area to come under the downtown design overlay. It's going to be developed into senior housing, so this is just kind of checking the box of some right-of-way, and I will move for approval.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. 8C, this is an ordinance on final hearing. This relates to parking penalties for blocking the streetcar. We had a presentation and then a public hearing on this item. Today would potentially be the final hearing on it and potential vote, but I think maybe we have some council members who would like to defer it. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Councilwoman Hammond. Councilperson Cooper and I met with Jason Fairbrush and Jesse Rush 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. And if either of them are available, I'd kind of like them to speak to our discussion, just sort of in brief. They made this really handy packet for us about some of the parts. They actually have assigned numbers to all of the parking spots along the streetcar route, and we're showing that they actually been tracking blockages per spot. And as of this year, have been doing that per month per spot. And even from last year's data, there's a pretty obvious area of a few hot spots that is kind of the words we ended up using, the term we used for it, where a lot of them are not really a problem. It's these handful of spots that are in areas where there's some drop-off loading kind of going on. There's areas around Myriad that maybe people who aren't as familiar with parking downtown typically park. And what we discovered from that meeting is that currently there is no signage posted about what the current fine is. So we asked Jason and Jesse whether it might be possible to defer this item a few months out, especially now with COVID. Obviously, downtown is a little different at the moment. So I don't know, that might need to be, extended out to, I don't know, like July or August to maybe reconsider. But I know from my concern, and I'll let Councilperson Cooper speak to anything he had as well. My concern was, to me, it doesn't really make sense to up a fine when we're not even posting about what the current fine is, and that maybe posting about the current fine, particularly in those hot spots, might be the next, step to figure out if we can get lower blockages just by posting information about what the current fine is. So with that, is Jason or Jesse available on the call maybe to speak to that as well?
Jason.
So while, Jason, I don't know if you can unmute the phone where you are. The council members had asked that we look at this, and Jason has talked with me about it and said they've identified some of those hotspot areas, as Councilwoman Hammond was mentioning, and they've looked at the areas where we have the biggest problems and felt like if we put some signage in those areas specifically, not to put clutter of signage throughout all of downtown, but to try to identify those areas where we could possibly put some of that in. I've looked at that and made the request that we consider to our staff that we look at some signage there that would allow us to assess if the current fine level would have more effect with more notice to people that they could be fined. And so they're looking at that and looking at the areas. And Jason, are you on?
Well, if Jason's not able to get unmuted, I guess I would like to motion for a deferral.
How long would you like to defer?
Councilwoman Hammond, July 21st.
Okay, that seems like a good, we can maybe revisit it then and see maybe if what we'd like to do, if things have changed a little bit.
And I second that. This is Cooper.
Mayor,
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the deferral to July? What was it, Francis?
Yeah.
21st.
July 21st.
Mayor, this is Mark Stonecipher. I'd like to comment on this for a second.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would really like to hear from Jason before we move this all the way to July 21st, and I know we're having some technical difficulties, but when we have 90 shutdowns a month because of this problem, I sure would like to hear from Jason. So would it be, Joe Beth, would you be okay if we just passed it to the next council?
Well, we're working on it. Hold on. Let's see.
I am here. I'm off on mute now. This is Jason.
Okay. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so, well, granted the blockages continue to be a problem for us, but we just started tracking blockages by space in January, whereas before we'd always track just blockages, by block face and then for the entire system. And we have, with at least 2 months of data now, January and February, we have identified like 4 locations along the route that are giving us, the most problems. And so whether we do, signage or more active, patrolling of the area, we would start with those. I mean, our recommendation would be to start with those 4 areas that are giving us the most problems anyway. So, I mean, as staff, we're certainly open to try and, to put the signage advising people not only will they be towed, but they could be fined, and seeing if that helps. We have our baseline, and we think we've got 2 months worth of data now. We put the signs out there for 2 months. I think we'd have a pretty accurate comparison, once normal business resumes. So, we're certainly inclined to trying it, and we think, concentrating on those areas that are giving us the most problems, will certainly give us the most benefit.
Well, I guess the question I have, Jason, this is Mark Stonecipher. Are we still having 90 shutdowns a month? And is there any evidence that by putting up these signs, it's going to make any difference whatsoever?
Yeah, so we are still looking at January and February. We are still looking at about 90 blockages a month. I can tell you that in these locations,
The city council meeting. What?
let's see here.
Oh, I have the information. It's the.
So what I was going to say is for these 4 locations that we've identified, for example, one location in particular, Robinson southbound between Park and Main, in January, that area alone made up 14 of the 90 blockages. And then in February, 15 of the 91 blockages were in that area alone. So then if we take that top, problem area and we add the next 3, highest problem areas, we're looking at about 30 blockages coming from about 4 areas along the route. So, about a third of our problems are in these concentrated areas. So if we can get that under control, then obviously they come down significantly. But won't, no guarantees we're going to get rid of everything, of course. But I thought it was interesting that we have that one area that's generating almost 14 or 15 blockages just in 4 parking spaces.
Yeah, and this is Cooper here. So the conversation when we met with Jason and Jesse, the story I told that the 2 stories that kind of worry me just from my campaigning days. One was, I met with a friend at Clarity Coffee on Main Street just to talk movies and stuff one day, very early in the campaign, and we went for a walk around City Hall, and he said to me that was the first time he's done that. He lives around 122nd and May, and his only association with downtown up until our walk has been going to municipal court to pay fines. And this isn't like some troubled kid, parking fines or, speeding or whatever. That's his only interaction. And that, I have to say, that's fairly common with people. And then the second story is when I was knocking doors, the further I got from downtown, remember Ward 2 goes up to 122nd. The further I got away from downtown, the more likely it was I would hear someone say that they don't go to downtown and they, no matter all the renaissance of this area, they associate it with, lack of parking, and they associate it with too much parking cost or just, all that sort of stuff. And I just don't want this streetcar fine to be yet another, kind of bit of that narrative for people. I don't want people to associate downtown with being an unwelcoming, inaccessible place. And I'd rather exhaust our effort before we, take that step. And to that point, Jason, is July a reasonable amount of time, or what time would you give that would allow us to really measure some metrics here?
Well, I think we need 2 months of normal business activity. So 2 months from when our normal business resumes would be my suggestion.
Also, relatedly,
but go ahead.
Relatedly, Jason, you using the word normal makes me wonder if, we don't know when everything's going to be back up and really, truly, outside of social distancing how can we really measure it, in April and May when we know for sure the social distancing is going to last through the end of April? I would not at all be surprised to see it last through May and June, but I don't know, July seems like a good guess.
I guess this is Mark Stonecyber here. I guess the question I'd have for Jason is, if we know we have 4 problem areas, how long is it going to take you to put up signs there?
Oh, we can have that done in a probably matter of weeks. I mean, maybe shorter than that, just based on the availability of getting the signs ordered. But yeah, we plan to have those up as soon as the city manager directs us to do so, if he does.
Joe Beth, I don't have any problem moving this to July, but I'd ask that we also add to the motion that we go forward with the signs in the 4 locations.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine with that. I think from from the question of whether we think the signs will make a difference, I think the thing that came out of that meeting for me was I didn't even know there was a fine potentially associated. So my concern is, if that's the case for most people, why increasing it, the fact that there's a fine alone seems like that we need to educate people about that before we think about increasing it. So yeah, I'm completely fine with, adding to my motion that we add those signs, because I think that, that education.
Let me just jump in. We don't have to add that to the motion. Let me recognize the city manager to state something.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've understood the conversation. I've been in discussion with Jason about this, so I understand what we're asking for here. And I would rather us not have it within the motion, just so that we have flexibility for the number of signs. If we see another area that's a problem, that we will manage that. I understand the direction on this.
So he'll put up signs, in other words.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we do have a citizen who signed up to speak on this item. I hope we can make this technically work. Gary Goldman. So what's the star 6 is one trick that you
Yes,
have
star 6 to unmute yourself, Mr. Goldman.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Gary.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
A couple quick things on this topic. As far as signage is concerned and spending money on signage, just one thing to take into consideration that, of course, any type of communication or signage, might help, but just to take into consideration, we're also dealing with human beings and human error being able to perfectly parallel park on a regular basis on the inside of the white line, including parallel parking is, a challenge in itself. We're expecting people to parallel park, not a lot of people that come down on a regular basis and make sure their mirror is not touching the line. So I'm not sure if a sign will help or not. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that, a lot of the feedback that we get as a small business in the downtown business area is that the streetcar takes too long, and some of us feel that it takes too long due to this issue that we're talking about. So, trying to find a solution as far as being able to park anywhere along the streetcar path is definitely a large topic that needs to be discussed, whether it's today or whether it's moved to July 21st.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to defer this item to July 21st. Any further discussion from the members of council? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. No. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that item is deferred. Now we're moving on to item 8B. This is the public hearing regarding the ordinance that was presented at our last meeting, introduced, I should say, at our last meeting, and a presentation was made. This relates to feeding animals in city parks and other city property. Today is merely the public hearing. No one has signed up to speak. I will open it to the floor for about 5 seconds if anyone else would like to speak on this item. Hearing none, we'll move on. Items 8E, F, G, H, I, J are all not quite ready, and so we will return to them a little later in our agenda. We will now move on to 8K1 and 2. 8K1 is a public hearing regarding the refunding of certain outstanding portions of the city's general obligation bonds. Series 2010, issued in the original principal amount of approximately $64 million. Item 2 is a resolution providing for the sale and issuance of general obligation refunding bonds in the amount not to exceed $35 million, et cetera. And I believe Brent Bryant will speak to these items.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Brent Bryant.
Way to go.
Yes, sir. Brent Bryant, Finance Director. In 2010, the city issued the $64.4 million worth of general obligation bonds. Per our standard, we made these bonds callable, and beginning with the maturities starting on March 1st of 2021. And what we're seeking your approval today is to authorize us to issue refunding bonds in the amount not to exceed $35 million at a negotiated price to be negotiated probably in the middle of April. Our policy, our debt management policy says that we have to at least achieve a 3% present value savings. Right now, based on current market conditions, we believe it'll be over 4% savings, which will equal about $1.5 million. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions for Brent from the council? Hearing none, let me formally state, again, no one has signed up to speak on 8K1, but is there anyone else who wishes to speak under that public hearing? I'll pause for a good, healthy 5 seconds. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the item found at 8K2, the resolution providing for the sale and issuance of the GO refunding bond.
Move the resolution approval.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously and with the 6 affirmative votes required.
Mayor?
And 7 is mayor.
We need a motion on J, the one that Brent Bryant.
Oh, we're going to go back to that. We skipped over, over E through J. Okay, item 8L1 is the public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed, except for the one stricken at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anyone on the call? No one has signed up to speak, but is there anyone on the call who wishes to speak under this public hearing? I'll wait about 5 seconds.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Okay, you kind of jumped the gun, but that's all right. I'll take that as a motion for 8L2, adoption of the resolution declaring that the structures are dilapidated. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. All right, 8M1 is a public hearing regarding the unsecured structures here listed, except for the one stricken at the beginning of the meeting. No one has signed up to speak, but I will wait about 5 seconds here to ask if anyone on the line wishes to speak under this public hearing. Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt the resolution found at 8M2 declaring that the structures are unsecured?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. 8N1 is a public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed, except for the ones stricken at the beginning of the meeting. No one has signed up to speak, but I will wait about 5 seconds and ask if anyone wishes to speak under this public hearing. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution found at 8N2 declaring that the buildings are abandoned.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Okay, 801 is a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2020 budget amendment that was presented at our last meeting. That was mostly adding the MAPS 4 funds to the remainder of this current fiscal year. 802 is a resolution adopting that amendment. First, let me ask if anyone wishes to speak under the public hearing portion found at 801, the public hearing regarding this budget amendment. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution found at 802 that includes this amendment to our fiscal year 2020 budget.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we're at 8P. This is a joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust approving an allocation of $5.5 million from the GO Limited Tax Bond proceeds for the OKC Small Business Continuity Fund. This is a proposal to provide support for our small businesses as they react and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we well know, many businesses are suffering a disproportionate, well, probably all businesses are suffering to some extent, but some more than others due to the unique nature of the pandemic and how it affects certain businesses, causing them to be public health threats. And this is something that we've talked about for the last 2 weeks, being very important that we respond to the secondary effects of COVID-19 just as much as the primary effects. And I really want to congratulate and thank the Alliance for Economic Development, the Chamber of Commerce, and our own city staff for developing this so proactively and so quickly. And I believe we have some presentations on this. Mr. City Manager, you want to introduce that?
Yeah, so Kathy O'Connor is with us, and she's going to just give a quick overview of the plan with the program. Kathy, if you're on and can unmute.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, great. So we developed this program in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce and city staff in order to provide some financial assistance to those businesses, especially small businesses that are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The proposal before you today asks for an allocation of $5.5 million from the general obligation limited tax bond proceeds that were authorized by the voters in 2017 for economic development and community development. The way that the program is structured right now is that it is intended for those businesses that can show that they've had a significant decline in business, 50% year over year in their sales since March 16th of 2020, and that they receive a majority of their revenues from on-location sales or transactions. Obviously, the businesses have to be located in the city limits. They need A priority will be given to businesses that have operated for at least a year. And to the fullest extent possible, we have a goal to allocate 25% of the funding for these programs to businesses that are located in low to moderate income census tracts. So that's kind of the broad overview of the program. More specifically, the program includes a proposed $1.5 million allocation to fund incentive payments to businesses with less than 15 full-time employees in an amount up to $10,000 to reimburse them for their payroll expenses. This program is really designed to help businesses retain employees. First of all, we think that's important from an economic standpoint, that we need employees being paid and having the resources to support their families. But also because of the nature of this money and that it is intended for economic development, the creation and retention of jobs is critical to meeting the legal requirements for these economic development funds. So that's the incentive payment, up to $10,000 reimbursement for payroll of retained employees. The second program is a small business loan program that has two parts. And these programs are both intended for businesses of 50 employees or fewer. The first one is a no interest rate forgivable loan of up to $50,000 that would be forgiven over time if the business meets certain requirements such as long-term job retention. So the idea is that they use these resources to keep their employees on the payroll. The second part of the program is a low interest loan of between $50,000 and $100,000. We would provide these at a low interest rate. Again, qualifying businesses would have to have less than 50 full-time employees. And the final part of the program is to provide some technical assistance to these small businesses. We've had a lot of questions from businesses about teleworking or developing a more robust online e-commerce platform, or how to help with navigating the federal stimulus package and the SBA process. So we thought that setting up a $500,000 allocation to help fund some resources for these small businesses would be is important. A few other things about the program is that businesses will not be allowed to stack programs. You can apply for a grant, or you can apply for one of the loans. You can't do all three. You can get a grant, you can get a loan. Any of the businesses can access the small business technical assistance. And in fact, even if they don't want a grant or a loan, we could make the technical assistance available. We plan to use a local bank to help us with the underwriting and servicing of the loan program. The incentive payment applications will be reviewed by a team of staff people from the city, the chamber, and the alliance, and then reviewed by a disbursement committee that will be set up by the city manager. The resolution also gives the city manager authority to move money between these four different programs. If, for example, we get much more demand for the incentive payments than we do the loans, we could potentially move money between the programs. So at the current time, we're working very hard to develop an online platform for businesses to apply for the program. We are working on application forms and the ability to upload the appropriate documents to prove eligibility. And we are obviously developing marketing materials and an FAQ and lots of different things, but none of those have been completed, pending your action today. So that pretty much sums up my comments. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you might have.
Kathy, this is Mark Stone Cipher. One question I had was, as far as the internal and administrative costs not to exceed an amount, can you explain that a little? And will that cost include the underwriting, et cetera, performed by local banks?
Well, at this point in time, Yes, we believe that there's an allocation of $500,000. It's a part of the resolution to cover our administrative costs. At this point in time, we have had a local bank come forward and offer to do the underwriting and servicing for free. So we're hoping that those costs are minimal. And then, but there will be expenses associated with staff time, just getting the program up and running, some potential marketing, media kinds of expenses. And then we are going to develop an online platform, and I don't know completely if that will cost us anything or not at this time.
Sure. Kathy, will there be a point in time we can identify the local bank that's going to provide those services for free so that we can thank them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Once we formalize that relationship, I'd rather have that a little further along. Another thing that, we hope to be able to begin accepting applications on April 6th. I don't know that we'll be able to get everything in place before then, just because of some of the technical requirements for the website. We want to make sure that we get it right and that we're not having, technical issues for people when they apply.
Thank you.
Kathy? Yeah. Kathy, this is David Greenwell.
Yes.
First of all, thank you and the staff and everybody involved for coming so quickly with this program. Time is of the essence in situations like this, so thank you for pulling this together so quickly. I want to just urge caution and good oversight of the disbursements related to the technical or professional services that may be provided, up to the $500,000 amount. So the SBA that gets involved in these types of activities on a regular basis are very concerned with how their funds will be spent. They do not allow any kind of contingent fees as it relates to professional fees to assist in the application. And I would just caution that the Oversight Committee adopt some of their guidelines, the SBA guidelines, in terms of how they pay for professional fees, and to make sure everything appears reasonable in terms of the request for that type of assistance. And then,
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
What I was going to say is our plan is to issue a request for proposals or a request for qualifications and develop a list of qualified vendors that we can then match businesses to and have some control over the scope of services. But I appreciate your comments about the SBA application. There's several things that are a part of that application that we may put on ours, because some disclaimers about, evidence that their decline in business is the result of COVID-19, some things like that. So I appreciate your comments.
Yes, and then my final question is, will the city auditor be able to review this program at some point in time just to ensure compliance with the guidelines, and that whatever the criteria is that's established in terms of determining who will get funding and how much, that it's applied uniformly, and just wanted to make sure that our city auditor has the ability to review this program at some point in time.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Brent Bryant's already been in conversations with the city auditor, and we've actually volunteered a couple of his staff to help review applications. So I hope that we will definitely have the auditors review and approval of the program.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you and all the staff that were involved with this.
They're all in remote mode. It sounds like they're...
Please mute your phone if you're not on the council or Kathy O'Connor.
This is Councilwoman Hammond. I have a few questions, and I don't know if it'd be Kathy or the city manager, but do we have an idea of who would make up this disbursement committee? Kind of whether it's background or geography, like what is the kind of qualifications that would get someone on this disbursement committee?
Well, I mean, for right now, we don't really have the committee determined yet, but it's probably, I will be on the committee, Brent and Joanna McSpadden will be on the committee, and then we might want to look at some bankers and other people that have some financial background to serve on the committee as well. Those were our initial thoughts. But yes, some geographic disbursement, experience disbursement would be helpful.
I'd also be curious, as I've talked to small business owners over the weekend after this was made public, one of the concerns that I've gotten is that this is very much like a top-down sort of solution, and so they've come up with all sorts of questions and concerns about, I've heard from some people that, their typical payroll of their, 14, 10, whatever employees is over $10,000. So, there's just some things that I feel like are maybe gaps in kind of what the actual needs are and what the program does. And so I'd be curious whether we can get whether it's entrepreneurial advisors or people who have owned a small business before but maybe aren't interested in applying, people with that experience to whether they just can have some input, particularly I think from areas of our community that are historically underrepresented, people of color, women, own businesses. So just kind of from that perspective, because I just do get concerned about some of those concerns that have been brought to me. Overall, I think we absolutely need this, and personally, I think we probably should have been doing something to this extent in a non-crisis mode, because I know there are so many parts of our city that, particularly, I think areas that have been historically redlined where it's really hard for businesses to get loans because they're seen as quote-unquote risky investments. I think the small business loan program would have been amazing in the best of times for businesses like that have come from those areas. But, and so just my concern is, is this enough in this time? My other question, so the census tract.
Can I try to answer that one first?
Sure. Yes, please.
Just so we don't get too, so I don't lose track of what your questions are. So first of all, we have been talking to people who own small businesses, who provide assistance to small businesses. We've talked to minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and they do think this will help. I do think we have to realize, though, that it may not be enough to solve one business's entire financial problem that they're having right now. So we were trying to find something that we felt was impactful enough to make a difference for these businesses. And frankly, compared to some of the other cities that we looked at, our $10,000 is pretty generous compared to what some other communities are doing. And I just think we have to be realistic about how many people we can help, and try to help maybe the ones that need it the most, which is, some of the 25% of these, trying to distribute it to low and moderate income census tracts. But yeah, we, totally understand that this may not solve everybody's problem. This is not enough money to do that.
Sure. Thank you. One of my other questions is related to the census tract. So I think about, that there are census tracts in Ward 6 that are quote unquote low to moderate income or disadvantaged, but one that's a little bit old data because things, the city has changed quite a bit, particularly in parts of Ward 6. So, it sort of goes, like, I think about opportunity zones where there are some areas that are in opportunity zones that are doing really well and they're fine on their own. They didn't really need that designation to lure investment. So I guess I'm just curious if there's any other metrics we'll be using besides the census tracts to really make sure that we're helping the kind of traditionally overlooked, areas of the city, and those small businesses are located in. Like I kind of referencing again back to areas that have been historically redlined is a very different low-income census tract than some areas of Ward 6 that, those folks probably have a good amount of, whether it's capital or just maybe a longer runway, I guess is the better way to put it. Everyone's hurting and in a crunch right now, obviously, because of the nature of this kind of slow motion disaster, but it doesn't erase the fact that, a census tract, low-income census tract in one part of the city is not necessarily translated exactly to other parts of the city, particularly for business owners of color. So yeah, I just was curious if there's any other metrics we could use and include to kind of narrow down that a little bit more.
We can look at it. I do think that we have to find something that is objectively measured by a third party to do this, or we open ourselves up for a lot of criticism. And we're going to get a lot of criticism anyway, because we won't have enough money to go around. So
sure.
We'll try to do the best that we can. I mean, I do think that the measures of very low income census tracts are pretty accurate and do reflect some of the things that you're talking about. So we'll take a look at that.
My questions, I have a couple. When it comes to what this looks like, what are some of those? Is the bank the only group that can help those small businesses complete this application? What other resources will people have in order to help them with this application process?
Well, we don't envision the bank helping people complete the application. I think we'll have to help them either through staff resources or maybe some of those technical resources I was talking about. The bank is just going to service the loans. They are going to underwrite them, but they're going to underwrite them based on our criteria, which would be much more lenient, is probably the best word to use, than what a traditional bank underwriting of a loan would be. But I think we're just going to have to help people that have trouble with the application. We're hoping that it's as simple, as possible, and that they can just check the boxes and upload documents and get through it pretty quickly.
Okay, and with this being for some with a no interest forgivable loan up to 10 years, what is that continuation look like to mitigate as far as these small businesses ensuring that they have the correct and immediate support that they need, including business advisors, accountant support? What are we going to help see them through that process, or is it up to them to make it through the 10 years?
Well, the loan will be a 10-year term, but on the forgivable part, it would be forgiven before that 10 years is reached. We would probably forgive it after 3 years. So I think once they have the loan, then we don't necessarily need to be a part of their business activity. That's being a little too intrusive, but
I don't think that's not my question. My question is, if they have concerns during that process, during that term, are they eligible, or will access be available for them to have that support when it comes to accountant support or business advisors during that time period?
We hadn't envisioned that. I would assume that we will exhaust these resources for this program very quickly. And so it would be really up to council if you wanted to fund some kind of ongoing additional resource like that.
Okay. My other question, as we're looking at this disbursement committee, and Councilwoman Hammond spoke to it, most of it, but I would like to see us have our most vulnerable census tracts represented as far as those businesses that we know are most vulnerable to be a part of this process to ensure that there is true equity in those census tracts that we are supposed to give priority to ensure that they have the success. And I know that's my concern anyway, as I have continually expressed with the conversation we had for the briefing, is that our census tracts that are most vulnerable are the ones that, in my opinion, in some aspects may fall through the cracks of this. So we're still going to need to figure out what support we can give to those vulnerable businesses. And even with the technical support, we were, again, talking to some of those small businesses. And I guess the question was, who would be running some of these programs when it comes to that? Because one small business that we spoke to, the $400,000 is really their annual budget for 2 years. So, that's going to be a concern for a lot of folks when it comes to that support.
Well, we're going to have to take it, application by application on a case by case basis and do the best that we can. So, but definitely hear what you're saying about the disbursement committee.
Are there any other questions from council for Kathy? Because we have some citizens who signed up to speak.
Yes, this is James Cooper. Kathy, I thank you for doing this work and presenting this as an option. And please pass that along to anybody else who joined you in that work. My concern, a lot of it I'll speak to during items from council, but specifically when I think of like the barber or someone who might be their own employee, they would be able to apply for this?
Yes, we are going to let independent contractors and sole proprietors apply.
Okay, that's good. I have a lot of that in Ward 2. And then when I think of Southside, just from teaching over there all those years, I wonder what kind of outreach we can do. I don't know what institutionally exists in terms of relationships to like the mechanics who are over there, the people who own those taquerias and those taco trucks who might not be members of the Hispanic Chamber, might not be members of the Southside Chamber. Those folk are really heavily on my mind, and I'm just wondering what outreach might look like to them.
We're talking about that and working on a marketing plan and looking at all the different kinds of resources that we might be able to have. Some of it is relationships, just people that we know in the community, and we'll be using those to help get the word out. It could be neighborhood alliance and neighborhood associations. It could be lots of different things. So, we're definitely thinking about that, thinking about having, in particular, Spanish translation documents available, things like that. So definitely been part of our discussions.
Yeah, you're using some pretty important words for me. Like I like neighborhood alliance being involved. I love the Spanish translation stuff. Infographics that are shareable on social media, I think would be beyond resourceful as well.
Yep.
And again, I'll speak to this at an items from council portion, but I am so appreciative of this $5.5 million, especially in comparison to the other cities. I would just say to anybody who's listening on the phone, outside of council and outside of the people who crafted this, for me, while this is commendable, I anticipate that we're going to have to go further. And I would say to anyone listening that this is going to be an all hands on deck moment. This is something the city's never done. And I don't think it's something that we can undertake just on our own. It's going to require a partnership as well with the state and federal government to really, really make sure that our efforts don't get swept away by inaction at either of those other two levels of government.
Yep. And I before we start taking questions from citizens, I would like to thank Brent Bryant and Joanna McSpadden, Wiley Williams, people on my staff, Jeff Seymour and his staff. We have worked so well together on this, and you should all be very proud that you've got a team behind you that really wants to try to make this successful. So it really has been an all hands on deck kind of thing. So
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Is there any other council member who wishes to ask her any questions before we go to citizens?
Mayor, this is David Greenwell. In regards to the access to assistance in filling out this application, as well as the numerous programs coming from the federal government, there are organizations already prepared to assist, such as SCORE, the Organization of Retired Executives, and other organizations. It's just a matter of getting the word out. And as Kathy mentioned, part of that process is just word of mouth and an informal network of getting access to these groups. And also certain organizations such as the Oklahoma City Chamber, the South Oklahoma City Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, they currently have plans to assist in that effort as well. So all I can suggest is that it's just a matter of timing before more of this type of assistance becomes known and available, but it's certainly on everybody's mind. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, and by the way, it's worth, driving home the point that none of this would be possible without the voters approving, the SIP program in 2007 and 2017. We really wouldn't know where to turn for these resources if not for that, and so thank goodness for that. And also, again, thank goodness for the Alliance, the Chamber, and our city staff for working together on this. Let me call on a few citizens who signed up to speak. We'll start with Gary Goldman. And Gary, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address, I neglected to ask you that earlier, and keep your remarks to 3 minutes. Gary, you're recognized. Gary?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Gary Goldman, GaryGoldman, business address is 714 North Broadway, Oklahoma City, 73102. First off, Kathy, fantastic job putting all this together and answering all the questions. It's much appreciated. Just a couple quick questions for the no interest forgivable small business loan program. The answer you gave me, the loan will be forgiven if you retain the number of employees over a 3-year period. How many employees are you referring to when you say the number of employees?
The number that you state you have when we begin this process to the date when it's forgiven is, I would assume, how it would work.
So it could be any number of employees that we have on. It wouldn't have to be our full. If we had 40 employees, but we're obviously not using 40 employees over a couple months, but we had you, would we still qualify for that?
Yes, I think so. I mean, some of these really specific things are going to have to be taken on a case-by-case basis when you apply and when we have the bank take a look at the loan applications.
Okay, then the last questions are just loan versus grant questions. I know some of these are pretty simple, but the small business, the $10,000 cash incentive, it is reimbursed, so that is a grant?
It is we have to call it an incentive payment, so it is a cash payment to the company, less than 15 employees, based on reimbursing payroll expenses.
Okay, so is that outside of the loan or grant program?
No, you can only apply for a grant or a loan, not both. And you can only apply for one of the loans.
So is what I just talked about, is that, you said it's an incentive program, is that a loan or a grant?
The $10,000 is an incentive payment. You might call it a grant. We can't call it that.
Okay, and then on the small business program, obviously the forgivable, no interest forgivable loan, I assume that's a grant?
It's a loan. It will have a loan agreement and a promissory note,
Okay.
like a loan.
That's a loan, and then the low interest, but then there's a low interest 2% 10-year. That sounds like a loan.
That is a loan, and it's for a larger amount of money. That's why there's an interest payment.
Okay, and then the small business technical assistance, that's a loan or grant?
No, we will pay the provider of those services directly. We will match a business with a provider, develop a scope of work, and pay the provider directly on behalf of the business.
Okay, so in summary, all I've heard is from the differentiation between loan and grant is there's on this list there's 2 grants and 2 loans and 1 incentive payment program.
No, there's one grant program, and it's the $10,000 for businesses with less than 15 employees.
Okay. All right, that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Moving on to John Pettis. And John, if you're on the line, don't forget to unmute your phone, and please state your name and address and keep your remarks to 3 minutes. John? Okay, we're going to move on to Apollo Wood. Apollo, you're recognized. Again, state your name, address, and keep your remarks to 3 minutes. And *6 is one way to unmute your phone, I guess, other than the usual way? The only way. The only way?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
John and Apollo. Okay, John, you can go first, and then Apollo will go after that. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. John Pettis, 1332 Northeast 54th Street, Oklahoma City, 73111. I'd like to thank the staff for this initial program. Most of my questions have been answered, but I still have 3 that I need clarification on. Number 1 is, will companies who pay their employees by check and at the end of the year give them a 1099, would they be eligible to participate?
So is the company using independent contractors?
Yes, and they give them a 1099.
Yes, they can apply, and the way we're looking at it right now, independent contractors can apply as well. So we'll just have to take it on a, like I said, a case-by-case basis as people apply.
Okay. Once this is up and running, do you have an anticipated turnaround time for application from application stage to approval?
Yes, we hope, as I mentioned earlier, to start accepting applications on April 6th. We will probably have to have a cutoff date because we're going to get more applications than we have money for. And then after that cutoff date, we'll start scoring them. The applications will be evaluated against a set criteria, and then we will begin to make payments. I would expect we will begin to make payments by the end of April, last week of April-ish is what I'm hoping.
Okay, my last question is, in reading HR 748, there's a possibility that the city could receive some funds from the federal government to basically augment this program. If those funds are received, will the city continue? Will they add those funds to this program, or once this program has spent the $5.5 million, that's the end of it?
Well, I mean, I think obviously that's up to council, but we'll have to look at what the what the regulations and the rules are that come down with that federal money and see if we can, if we need to adapt this program any, or if we can just use this one. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how all that plays out.
There it is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now Apollo Woods.
Good morning, Mayor. Apollo Woods, OKC Blackie. Maybe my questions have been answered, and thank you to Kathy Alliance and her team, Oklahoma City Chamber, and the staff. Just wanted to point out some positive things. We're working very closely with our minority and Black-owned restaurants here in Oklahoma City, as well as some of our other colleagues as well. What I do want to say is that with this going on with this pandemic, there's been a lot of organic community effort coming together, which has been great to see. A lot of increased activity on social media, through web chats, practicing social distancing. I do get pretty amped up when I see people in crowds together, especially walking through the parks and trails. But, you know, people are going to do what they're going to do. We are encouraging them to oblige social distancing. Businesses are becoming very creative to stay afloat. We are a resilient community. Reaching out to colleagues across the different cities, across the city. What I'm glad to hear is that the technical assistance part is included in this component, which is very important. I think right now, this seems like a great short-term solution, but my concern is that I'm looking at business long-term. So hopefully from this initiative, they'll spark some long-term solutions, strategies to support our small businesses and minority-owned businesses long-term. I do believe that this is an opportunity for our minority-owned businesses to build a sustainable framework, business credit and capital. So I'm excited to see that. One question that I have is, comment, is that I don't believe that the word is getting out beyond the same networks that are being used. So I also manage the Black Leadership Network, and we've created a digital resource guide. We have over 1,600 Black professionals in our group. But beyond that, there's not a lot of information being gathered. So I'd like to offer myself as a resource, as a connector, as a bridge builder to make sure this information like this and others get shared through those small businesses and entrepreneurs on our network. I'm grateful that this is happening. I believe that we will get through this, and thank you, Mayor, and the council members and staff for being frontliners as well. You all are also taking risks, and I think that was really my only comment or concern about getting the word out. So Kathy and the mayor's office and council members, if I can do anything to get the word out to our locally owned, minority owned, Black owned businesses in Oklahoma City metro area, please consider me as a resource.
Thank you, Apollo. I appreciate that. We haven't really gotten much of the word out yet because we needed to wait until after today. So.
Okay. I'm available.
This is Councilman Cooper. Apollo, I'm glad that you called, and it's funny because your name was a name that was on my mind in terms of someone who would be a good connective thread to our small business community. So I'm glad you're already trying to sign yourself up.
Anywhere I can.
Okay. That's all our citizens who have signed up to speak. We could now entertain a motion to adopt item P.
If you don't mind, I have another question.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Knight?
Yeah, I had a question when it comes to, as we were listening to some of those questions and concerns, is it possible to get regular reports for the applicants and those who get funded, and to understand maybe as to why some of those applicants may not have been approved, so we can understand where we may need to work when it comes to better resources or other alternatives for our small businesses?
Yes, and I think one thing that I failed to mention or would like to suggest is that maybe, for the next council meeting or the next few council meetings, that there be an item on the agenda or a report where we can update you on how this is going. And yes, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where the gaps are and if people don't qualify why they are and things like that. So yeah, we're definitely going to be looking at those kind of trends. So
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? Okay, if not, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move the item.
Move for approval.
Move for approval.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we are now going to move back in our agenda. We are ready for the bond sales. And this means that item 8E through J, I am now going to address all at once. I'm going to, for legal reasons, I'm going to speak for a while here, reading some things, and then we're going to go back and Brent Bryant's going to walk us through and we'll take a series of votes. So just to describe for public notice, item 8E1 is an award purchase of the $51,265,000 City of Oklahoma City General Obligation Bond, Series 2020, to the bidder whose bid is determined to offer the lowest true interest cost. Item 8E2 is an ordinance on final hearing with an emergency, providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds in the sum of $51,265,000 by the City of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, authorized at an election duly called and held for such purpose, prescribing form of bonds, providing for a combined bond issue designated General Obligation Bond Series 2020, providing for registration thereof, designating the registrar for the issue, providing for levy of an annual tax for the payment of principal and interest on the bonds, and fixing other details of the issue, approving the form of a continuing disclosure agreement and an official statement, and authorizing executions and actions necessary for the issuance and delivery of the bond. Item 8F is a resolution authorizing the sale of $51,265,000 of general obligation bonds, Series 2020 of the City of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, fixing the amount of bonds to mature each year, fixing the time and place the bonds are to be sold, authorizing the publication of a notice of sale, approving and authorizing official statements and distribution thereof, authorizing executions and actions necessary for issuance and delivery of the bonds. Item G is stricken from the agenda. Item H, 1, is an award purchase of the $60,215,000 City of Oklahoma City General Obligation Bonds, Taxable Series 2020, to the bidder whose bid is determined to offer the lowest true interest cost. Item 8H2 is an ordinance on final hearing with an emergency, providing for the issuance of general obligation bonds in the sum of $60,215,000 by the City of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, authorized at an election duly called and held for such purpose, prescribing form of bonds, providing for a combined bond issue designated General Obligation Bonds, Taxable Series 2020, providing for registration thereof, designating the registrar for the issue, providing for levy of an annual tax for the payment of principal and interest on the bonds, and fixing other details of the issue, approving the form of a continuing disclosure agreement and an official statement, and authorizing executions and actions necessary for the issuance and delivery of the bond. Item 8I is a resolution authorizing the sale of $60,215,000 of general obligation bonds, Taxable Series 2020 of the City of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, fixing the amount of bonds to mature each year, fixing the time and place the bonds are to be sold, authorizing the publication of a notice of sale, approving and authorizing official statements and distribution thereof, authorizing executions and actions necessary for issuance and delivery of the bonds. Item 8J is stricken from the agenda. With that, we'll return back to item E, and I would turn it over to the city manager, maybe to present some other necessary information.
Yeah, so Brent Bryant is on the line and will give us an update on the results of the sale.
Yes, sir. Brent Bryant, Finance Director. On item 8E1, today we had a really good day in the market. We've been concerned in the last couple of weeks about the market, but we had a very good day today with the market. On the $51,265,000 General Obligation Bond Series 2020s, we had a total of 6 bids today. With the lowest, bid, we recommend the lowest bid go to JP Morgan Securities LLC. with a true interest cost of 2.614628. Again, we recommend for the Series 2020 General Obligation Bonds, recommend that to J.P. Morgan Securities, LLC, with a true interest cost of 2.614628. And following, in addition to that, I need to read off the maturities that have been provided. I will like to announce that the completed documents are available under the heading March 31st, 2020, City Council Additional Materials, and it can be located at www.okc/departments/city-clerk. Regarding the 2020 bonds, with those maturing on March 1st of 2022, they had an interest rate of 2%. The 23s had an interest rate of 2%. The 24s had an interest rate of 2%. The 25s had an interest rate of 2%. And the maturities from 26 through 28 had a maturity of have an interest rate of 2%. For maturities from 2029 through 2040, they all had an interest rate of 4%. And that's everything as it relates to item 8EI 1 and 2. I believe we need a vote on those separately, and then we'll vote on item H1 and 2.
So I'll move item 8E1.
Do you have a motion?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, which I will take as being for item E1, the award purchase. We do need a vote on that, correct, Craig?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so any further discussion on that, item E1, 8E1? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner.
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes.
McAtee.
Yes.
Stone.
Aye.
Greenwell.
Yes.
Hammond.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Stone Cipher.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll need a couple votes on 8E2. First is the ordinance, and then we'll take an emergency. So is there a motion to approve item 8E2?
Move the ordinance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner.
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes.
McAtee.
Yes.
Stone.
Aye.
Greenwell.
Yes.
Hammond.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Stone Cipher.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor.
Motion passes unanimously. Now, we'd entertain a motion for to adopt the emergency on that ordinance found in 8E2.
I'd move to adopt an emergency on the ordinance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner.
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes.
McAtee.
Yes.
Stone.
Aye.
Greenwell.
Yes.
Hammond.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Stone Cipher.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. All right. Motion for the emergency passes unanimously and with the required 7 votes. Okay. New information. We are also striking item F. We had already previously stricken item G. Okay. Now we go to 8H1. This is the award purchase of the bonds for $60,215,000. The Brent, did you talk about that, or do we have to go back to you again?
Oh, we have to go back to me, sir. And one thing I'd like to recognize, I would like to recognize my Assistant Finance Director, Angela Pierce, and Mike Baskin, who've been working tirelessly behind the scenes right now getting this together, and I just wanted to recognize them. Today, we also had a good day issuing $60,215,000 in taxable Series General Obligation Bonds 2020. We had a total of 5 bids today, and we recommend the award to Citigroup Global Markets Incorporated with a true interest cost of 2.685850. One thing I would like to just let council know, our tax-exempt bonds that we sold had a true interest cost of 2.61. Our taxable bonds that we sold today had a true interest cost of 2.68. So so we got really good rates on both taxable and tax-exempt today. So with that, we recommend approval of award to the Citigroup Global Markets Incorporated again for true interest costs of 2.685850, and now I'll read the maturities for that issuance. With the items maturing in 2022, 3%, 2023, 3%, 24, 3%, 25, 3%, 26, 2.75, 27, 2%, 28, 2%, 29s, 2.125, 30s, 2.25, 31s, 2.375, 32s, 2.45, 33s, 2.5, 34s, 2.625, 35s, 2.75, 36, maturity 2.875, and then we had term bonds for 37, 38, 39, and 40 at 3%. And again, we had 5 bids, and we recommend Citigroup Global Markets Incorporated at a true interest cost of 2.685850.
I already ate a pack, so I really don't need another whole pack.
If you're not a council member of Brent Bryant, please mute your phone. Thank you. Brent, please continue.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. All right, so we are on item 8H1. This is the award purchase of $60,215,000. Is there a motion to approve?
I'd move item 8H1 that we award the purchase to Citigroup.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner.
Yes.
Cooper.
Thought she was quitting.
Cooper.
Cooper.
Yes.
McAtee.
Yes.
Stone.
Aye.
Greenwell.
Yes.
Hammond.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Stonecipher.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. 8H2 is the ordinance on final hearing relative to these bonds for $60,215,000. Is there a motion for adoption?
Move the item.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner.
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes.
McAtee.
Yes.
Stone.
Aye.
Greenwell.
Yes.
Hammond.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Stonecipher.
Yes.
Mayor. Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Now the emergency for that ordinance at item 8H2. Is there a motion?
I'd move the ordinance as an emergency.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion passes unanimously and with the required 7 votes. Now I will go ahead and strike item I as well. 8I is stricken. 8J was previously stricken. All right, this places us back on schedule now. We will return to item 8Q. We do not need executive session. 8Q1 is a resolution approving the request for salary continuation for Lieutenant Kevin Bryant, et cetera. Is there a motion?
Move the resolution.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. 8R, resolution authorizing the municipal councilor to confess judgment without admitting liability in the United States District Court case titled Dawson v. City of OKC. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. 8S1, resolution authorizing the municipal councilor to confess judgment without admitting liability in the United States District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma case styled Knutson versus City of OKC. Don't believe we need executive session. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we're at 8T1, claims recommended for denial. Don't believe we need executive session. No one has signed up to speak. Would entertain a motion to deny the claim.
Move the claims for denial.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. 9A1, claims recommended for approval. Don't believe we need executive session. No one has signed up to speak. Is there a motion to approve the claim?
So moved.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stonecipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Now we're at item 10, items from council. We have one listed item here. 10A is a resolution encouraging residents to respond to the 2020 census and designating April 1st as Census Day. Councilwoman Hammond?
Thank you. When I originally approached our public information office about helping me write this resolution and get it on the agenda, I had hoped that we would be in a bit of a different situation and that we could host a few of our census partners at council meeting and have a nice photo op, but unfortunately we are not. But nevertheless, I think especially given this disaster, we recognize how important getting a complete count of our residents throughout the city is, and particularly, you know, those undercounted groups that I know our public information office has been doing a great job with all of our partners to just get the word out. I've seen a lot of really great stuff on social media from various representatives throughout the community promoting this, and I think this could be an opportunity just to have that extra kind of flourish, I guess, of making sure that locally we're declaring tomorrow, April 1st, as Census Day and really encouraging folks to fill out their census. I know I believe we're in a competition with Tulsa to get a higher count, and knowing that from the, the state level, I believe it's our Chamber of Commerce at the state level and Department of Commerce and so forth are doing some work at getting the count out as well. But anything we can do to encourage our residents, I think will hopefully help us beat Tulsa and make sure that we have an accurate count so we get as much funding from the federal government and have all of the right representation in our communities. So I'll motion for approval of this resolution.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Griner,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
McAtee,
Yes.
Stone,
Aye.
Greenwell,
Yes.
Hammond,
Yes.
Nice,
Yes.
Stone Cipher,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. The resolution is adopted, and April 1st is Census Day, and I do, of course, join Councilwoman Hammond and the rest of the council in encouraging everyone to please participate. We will now go around an imaginary horseshoe, and we'll start with Ward 1. And if you have nothing to say, just say, nothing to say, Mayor, or somehow acknowledge it so I can move on.
Nothing.
All right, Ward 2.
Yes. So, thank you. I really want to applaud again Kathy and Brent and anybody who worked on the $5.5 million in incentives and low to no interest loans to our small business community. I suspect we'll be back to ask for more because the calls I get from my small business community and they're so thankful for this moment where our city is stepping up, and it makes me think there's going to be some more steps. Very specifically, though, I'm not saying that this is the city's position currently. What I am saying is this is where I'm at with this moment, and I really just want to be on record saying this. So I think that we need to I think to meet this moment with the seriousness it demands, we need our country's federal government to work with us to strengthen our city's efforts. With our physical distancing efforts, we're, of course, working to slow the spread of the disease. However, to keep our people safe and to begin making right our city's economy, we need a clear strategy from FEMA and our White House regarding, I would say, 4 action items. Number 1, what is the plan to implement nationwide mass testing, starting with first responders, healthcare workers, people over 60, folk in long-term care facilities, and immunocompromised individuals? What's the specific plan to increase drastically the production and distribution of tests including necessary chemicals and kits to collect specimens. Critically, what's our plan to implement something similar to the successful strategy we're seeing in South Korea, which has, and this is from Science Magazine, South Korea has the most expansive and well-organized testing program in the world. According to Science Magazine, quote, South Korea has tested more than 270,000 people, which amounts to more than 5,200 tests per million inhabitants. And that is more than any other country except tiny Bahrain. This approach has slowed the disease without resorting to authoritarianism. Moreover, South Korea, and again, this is from Science Magazine, South Korea demonstrates, quote, diagnostic capacity at scale is key to epidemic control. And that was them quoting from Raina McIntyre, an emerging infectious disease scholar at the University of New South Wales, Sydney. And now moving out from the quote, I just want to say that with this approach from FEMA and our White House, our city will have an opportunity to expand testing widely to young and old alike, allowing us to find where local spread is occurring so we can socially isolate folk and prevent the disease from spreading into more communities. So that's one action item, mass testing. Number two, to implement mass testing nationally, we need to know FEMA and our White House's plan to produce and distribute personal protective equipment to first responders and healthcare workers. Right now, our White House through FEMA requires local and state governments to exhaust all efforts to secure PPE. And while our city takes such steps, we wait. Why? Specifically, what's the plan to keep safe those on the front line administering these tests? What's FEMA and our White House's plan to increase drastically the production and distribution of ventilators as well? So that's mass testing and personal protection equipment. Number three, I am thankful to Oklahoma's congressional delegation for passing a historic $2 trillion relief package. Too many of my neighbors, friends, and Ward 2 constituents lost their jobs due to COVID. The relief coming from Congress will save lives, but only if Congress takes further action to invest in individuals. Our people can pay rent, buy groceries, purchase prescriptions, etc. 4, moreover, what's the plan from Congress in a follow-up relief package to help our city's small business community pay rent and utilities to help retain workers? So again, mass testing, personal protective equipment, further investment in individuals, and further investment in our small business community. Taken together, these 4 action items have the potential to slow the spread of the disease, save lives, and begin making right our city's economy. At the local level, I am proud of the historic vote City Council took today to support our small business community. But without state and federal government as willing partners, our efforts amount to a Band-Aid on a dam, and our local efforts must not be in vain. We have cause for concern. As conservative commentator Rich Lowry notes regarding COVID-19, quote, President Trump spent the initial weeks minimizing the threat and talking of it magically disappearing, end quote. And again, this is from a conservative commentator. We cannot afford inaction. We cannot rely on magical thinking. We cannot stay home forever. And that's the end of that quote. And this is me now. We must move swift to slow the spread of the disease, save lives, and begin making right our city's economy. Too many Ward 2 residents worked too hard to write Oklahoma City's recent Renaissance story, and their work must not be in vain. Finally, again, we've got to make sure that we are remembering our Oklahoma standard here, that we are resilient. It's who we are, from the native peoples who first settled this land to the Dust Bowl to this very moment. And I would say we are in a moment that is the Spanish flu meets the Great Depression, meets 9/11, meets the financial crash. This needs to be an all hands on deck moment. We cannot not meet this moment. I would encourage everybody who would like to know where I'm getting these resources, why I'm thinking about mass testing the way that I am, why I'm thinking about personal protective equipment the way that I am. There was a PBS NewsHour segment. It's entitled, and you can Google this, PBS NewsHour, Why the U.S. is Still Severely Constrained in Ability to Test for COVID-19. So those are my thoughts. I just do not like the idea of inaction. I do not like the idea of telling our people, let's physically distance from each other, but not have a plan of how we're going to end this moment. And so those are the 4 action items I would recommend as the council person forward to. And in concluding, I would say this has been weighing heavily on me as I've learned about our incredible efforts from the emergency management team at securing that personal protective equipment. I am so thankful to Franklin Barnes for his work. I think they're doing incredible work, and now they need a partner in the White House who's going to help them really do the work that we need to get out of this moment. I've been thinking a lot about how First Christian Church was a sanctuary in the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing, and because of that, I just feel a responsibility to step up and talk about how we are going to get out of this and not just remain at home. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Council, for the vote you took today, and thank you, Mayor, for the work you're doing. Just thank you.
Thank you. Ward 3?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just one observation or comment. Thank you for your comments, James. What we did this morning was to pass the Small Business Continuity Program intended to help our small businesses pay rent, pay their employees, and jumpstart the economy. Hopefully, we'll keep our eye on that target as we move forward, and everybody has a different approach as to how this could be implemented. But if we come together and implement it in a cohesive manner, we'll have some results that will meet the need and will make our small businesses and the employees that they service successful through some very difficult times. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ward 4?
I'm good, thanks, Mayor.
Ward 5?
Your Honor, thank you. I appreciate it. And first of all, thanks to all the city employees who have done a great job during this difficult time, as well as everybody throughout the city. Just to remind individuals, the actions we took this morning with respect to assisting privately owned businesses, small businesses, that's just one of many programs currently in place. Funding is already coming through to businesses. Well over a week ago, the Families First Act was passed, which provided for paid leave for individuals impacted by the virus, as well as both directly in terms of those who contract the disease, as well as family members that need to stay at home, or situations where child care is not available. Also, many payroll tax incentives in terms of tax credits and reimbursements to employers are being provided for those who retain employees. The Paycheck Protection Program, businesses can gain up to $10 million in terms of loans. Of that, the first 2 months worth of expenses in terms of wages, health insurance, utilities, rent, mortgage payments, those are eligible for forgiveness for first 2 months. We anticipate more support will be coming along once the government has an idea as to the ability to take advantage of these programs. So the key is knowing where to apply, how to access this assistance that is readily available, waiting to gain access from businesses. So be on the lookout for all that information, and it's really just a matter of pursuing that information, and these funds are currently available. So thank you, Mayor, and good luck to everyone, and hopefully we will get through this in a manner that is not too damaging. And one thing, Mayor, that I think might be helpful is if we could, whether it's through the City County Health Department or some other means, obtain information in terms of how local hospitals are doing in terms of any supplies, equipment that they may be needing that they currently don't have available. We know a lot in the healthcare industry have been impacted in terms of elective surgeries and more normal routine type preventative appointments and care have been terminated. So there's a group within the healthcare profession that are beginning to see situations where they don't have as much work as they normally do, and possibly even some layoffs are taking place in the healthcare industry, depending upon what type of healthcare they're providing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 6.
Yes, thank you. I would like to echo, I believe a few council members have commended our city staff, and in particular, I know so many of our staff and folks at the City County Health Department have been working just nonstop the past 2 weeks and beyond, trying to respond to this. And in particular, though, I'd like to just commend our Public Information Office. I don't know how they are keeping up with everything. Just the amount of information that, as things have changed so quickly, I just really commend them for keeping the public informed, and then somehow in the midst of all of this also creating new accounts on social media for our Spanish-speaking residents is just really amazing. And I just want to say thank you to all of how responsive they've been across social media platforms, as well as just proactive and getting graphics ready for the various emergency orders, and just making sure that that information is as digestible for the public as possible. I'd also like to speak to, I know I brought this up at council 2 weeks ago, but I'd also like to just, again, make mention of all the people in the city that are experiencing homelessness right now. They're a particularly vulnerable population, and I know we have city staff as well as multiple agencies that are partners in the community that have been, again, just working day to day to respond and figure out how to continue serving those folks at a distance. I know a lot of the work is trying to continue to implement our Housing First philosophy and get folks that they can into housing as quickly as possible. But we know we have a lot of folks that are still living unsheltered, and trying to communicate with those folks, get them resources, and also find ways to get them shelter, particularly for people who might be experiencing symptoms or need to isolate from the greater community. And in particular, I'd like to mention, and just anyone who's on this call or any other council members that can help advocate at this level. I know a group of partners have come together in Oklahoma City to request, essentially we have the resources for locations for that emergency shelter opportunity to help get people inside and distance from one another. But the issue that we're running into is staffing. So I know they've put an application together through emergency management department to get National Guard nurses and other healthcare staff through National Guard. But we just need as much advocacy as possible to get those resources to the city, because right now, with rain last night, the storms we've had, anyone who might be experiencing symptoms or and already has real vulnerable mental health or physical health needs, just is really inhumane to be to be leaving folks outside in that situation. So just any advocacy that that can be provided to help those partners who've been just working nonstop to serve people with already, a lot of barriers and very little resources to do that in a crisis. They need all the support that they can from our city leadership and above. So I appreciate the assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 7?
Yes, I also wanted to commend our staff for everything that's been happening since we have entered this pandemic for our city. And I especially want to thank those that are still working, especially our sanitation, city workers, our utility workers, our public works workers that you see still doing the job in those trucks and cars passing by still during this process. So we definitely commend them for the work that they're doing throughout this time to ensure that the city continues to progress. A couple of things I wanted to mention. The first one is today's literally the last day of Women's History Month. And as I mentioned the last council meeting, I mentioned some of those female mayors that we have in our state of Oklahoma, and I failed to mention one, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that there is a female mayor also in Boley, Oklahoma. So there's some wonderful things happening there right now as far as to reestablish and rehabilitate different parts of Boley. So under that leadership and just community members stepping in, we're able to see those take place. Some of the other things I want to mention are the resilience of the community in Ward 7, especially during this process of what's going on. I want to commend Restore OKC and the partnership they had with Skyline Urban Ministries. They had a food giveaway last week, and they fed over 100 families with groceries that came through drive-through method. And just to know people are able to have a need met in the community, it truly means a lot when you have entities such as Restore OKC, Skyline Ministries, and all those partners that help to make sure that those families are being fed, and also our school system to make sure our young people are getting fed. And we do know there have been new schools that have been added to the school meals program, including in our community, Douglas High School and Menace Lakeview, for those young people that we know 0 to 18 who may need meals, that they can also go to those particular areas besides elementary school locations. We also want to commend Fairview Baptist Church. They did a food giveaway this past weekend as well. And this is what we talk about, as the mayor spoke about in your comments, this is the time to be a neighbor, and we have seen resiliency in folks being neighbors to those that are around them, but we also are happy that those folks, and we hope that they are still continuing to stay safe, and that social distancing aspect, and just ensuring that while they are being safe, that they're still also taking care of others. So we thank everybody for that. I want to make mention of the National Cowboy, Western, and Heritage Museum. It sits in the Adventure District in Ward 7, and if you have not been following their Twitter, you should, because Cowboy Tim has taken off and taken flight and given joy to a lot of folks through this time. And hashtag the Cowboy has received international recognition during this time to highlight the things that are happening at the museum. So the great thing about what is taking place, although it's bittersweet that we can't get outside for a lot of us, we can experience some of those places we've never been, including a museum such as this and the intricate details of different things that people may or may not have paid attention to. So with that, I know they have grown as far as their support in their social media in a lot, quite a bit, 379% on Instagram, 49% on Facebook, and 2,058% on Twitter. That's just for one account. So this speaks to, again, the resiliency that we still have for during this time, and also with our Oklahoma City Zoo. This is a hard time for them, as we know, but they still have the zoo at 2. that people can tune in and watch. So those are just a few things that are happening when it comes to some of those places I wanted to highlight as well. As also our restaurants and our chefs, and I want to say thank you to those chefs and those businesses that are still operating in mind with those workers that are unable to work. When I say that, I know of a chef in Ward 7 that is purchasing enough food for his wait staff and the people that work for him to ensure that they have a meal. So, it's those things where we have to take care of each other as well. And also, we look at other restaurants that are still open in the community, and we have quite a few that are in business, and unfortunately, we had some that just couldn't take the hit that came, and they had to shut their doors. But I would encourage folks to still make sure we're doing that online ordering and curbside ordering for a lot of those businesses, especially a lot of those minority businesses that we know are still in operation, and you can find a list of those on social media too. And I know in general want to commend Florence's. If you hadn't seen that, a couple weeks ago they were on Guy Fieri Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and they were on there talking about their business, and it was really timely for them to be on there in the midst of what's taking place. So I hope people will still continue to patron all of those places, especially those in Ward 7, those businesses that really need our assistance and our support. A couple other things. Physicians Week, it is Physicians Week, so we definitely want to say thank you to all of our physicians that are working overtime to ensure that we are able to get the resources and the help to those who need it the most, especially those who have received those positive results due to COVID-19, and that they get the support that they truly need. I know one of the things that we talked about, James and I, when we went on our congressional trip with NLC, was broadband. And right now, this is something that I believe on a city level, we all as council members can continue to advocate for better access and broadband in our rural areas and those other areas that we know are unable to receive it, especially during this time when we know our school districts are going online as far as a lot of that learning, and for our young people to ensure that they get all of the resources that they need so they won't fall in the cracks and be left behind. As far as our seniors, I know I've been trying to understand what some of those needs are for some of our seniors that may be self-dependent, and I understand for some who may be on assistance, they are able to get groceries, but they aren't able to use whatever assistance they have for paper products. So if there's anyone that can assist in helping some of our seniors with that effort, that would be a great thing that we would be able to help with our seniors as well. So with that, again, I just want to say, please make sure we are continuing the social distancing, shelter in place, and we will definitely get through this as a city. So thank you.
Thank you. Ward 8.
Yes, just briefly, Your Honor, a couple of things. I was so sad to read this morning the Steve Lackmeyer article about Gerald Rappaport. I don't know if everyone knew him, but Gerald was the general manager of the Skirvin Hotel. He was a top-notch hospitality manager who loved his guests. He loved his employees, and he most of all loved to promote and protect the Skirvin, which is a treasured historic landmark for Oklahoma City. When he came to the city, he embraced the city. He was active with nonprofits. He will be missed. Gerald was 58 years of age. My condolences go out to his wife, Nancy. Secondly, I wanted to tell the City Council that on April 14th, the Judiciary Committee will be coming to you with a proposal through Judicial Order 2005, which will extend the penalty reduction program, which was set to end today. Our goal with that reduction program was to collect $200,000. And despite what's happened the last 2 weeks, we're at $195,000. So we're going to ask the City Council to extend that program on April the 14th. Finally, my thoughts and prayers go out to all the families who are suffering because of this virus, who have lost loved ones. I pray every day for the hospital staffers, the first responders, the nurses, and the doctors. May God be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes items from council. Item 11 is city manager reports.
Yeah, the only thing that we have on today is claims and payroll, but I do want to say, I just mentioned thanks to Mayor Holt and to the council for leadership during this crisis. I also appreciate the council members who've made mention of the many city employees who are continuing to serve. We're doing all we can to provide as much flexibility as possible, either in work from home or flexible leave usage, to be able to protect our employees where we can, but also make sure that we can continue to provide the critical services that we provide. So many of those services, you know, some of them are upfront and obvious with our first responders who are doing a great job, police and fire and welfare workers out there doing their jobs every day, are responding to assist our residents, but also the other jobs that aren't so noticeable unless you don't have those services, and being like water and wastewater and the solid waste services, street repairs, just all those different services that our employees provide, and then the many employees that we have that work behind the scenes that aren't recognized in what they're doing on a daily basis, just in there doing their work every day. And our employees are doing a great job. Our leaders within the city are doing a really good job to help our employees stay safe, but also to be able to serve our residents. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, and just publicly thank our employees for the work that they're doing. That's all I have.
Great. Yeah, well, so grateful to our city employees who are on the front line. We have now on to item 12, citizens to be heard. We have none who have signed up. That concludes the business on our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.